So it's been several weeks since the last update. I was hoping to dig this over sooner, but I just couldn't get a good supply of compost. I've still not managed to find a good supply of compost, but I've just had to fork out a bit more than I would have liked to for the compost. I would like to get this really rich and good for the plants. I have done it with this corner. I just bought lots of small bags. I've got some big bulk bags for this section to really enrich the soil, because as I said before, it is terrible, really sandy, and I found a lot of other interesting features which are going to be a real struggle for me to dig this bed over. So I'll just quickly go over what's happened recently. I was very fortunate that one of my neighbours was cutting down an enormous Leylandi tree, and I managed to get all the wood chips. So if I pan over, you can see I've actually got 2 bulk bags there, and there's actually about 4 bulk bags worth in total. I've kind of stored it in various places in the garden. So that is what I'm going to be using as a mulch over the surface to keep the weeds down, but also over time it will break down and really enrich the soil and feed the microorganisms and worms in the soil. So I've already put about a 15cm thick mulch on here, probably a little bit too thick. You can see that's why there's slight hollows around the plants, because I don't want to bury the stems. But I put a really thick layer. I'll probably do a similar thing again, and as it breaks down, it's just going to really add to the soil. And because I've got a real lack of compost, there is something else I'm going to do to try and get more organic matter into the soil and compost into the soil without having to buy more compost, and I'll show you what that is now. So what this big mound is basically any organic matter I've been cutting off from hedges, from the lawn, from weeds. I've just put in a giant pile, and I've just been composting it, turning this every 2 or 3 days. Just starting to decompose, but we've had a really dry period of weather. I keep watering this, but it keeps drying out, so it's not quite perfect. It's not composting. But what my plan is I'm going to use this as a mulch on the surface. So once I dig over the soil, add the compost, add the manure and the feeds and the ash as well to the soil, I'm then going to mulch the soil with this and then cover this up with the wood chips, and then this will just decompose underneath the wood chips, between the soil and the wood chips, and it should create a nice compost layer which the worms can then dig into the soil. So it'll help me in 2 ways. One, it will get rid of this pile of compost which at the moment isn't decomposing well because there's a bit too much woody material and it's a bit too dry, and it will also mean that I don't have to worry about buying even more compost for extortionate prices. I can just make my own compost, and that will just slowly decompose underneath the mulch layer in between the soil. So I'd just like to quickly talk about a couple of the issues I'm going to have with this soil. I have got a few weeds starting to appear because I've left it so long now. They're starting to regrow. Luckily it's been a drought, so there hasn't been too many weeds. In the last week we did have some heavy rain and all these grass seedlings have come up, but luckily they're not too established. That's not a big problem. I've got this section still to dig over, which has a lot of cocosmia. Luckily that's not too hard to take out. I've left the nice peony in the corner there. I will transplant that in winter, not really the best time of year to transplant that now. And I might keep this rose, I'm not sure. It is quite susceptible to black spot. All the new roses I've bought for the garden, made sure they were disease resistant, and they're looking great at the moment. No black spot, but as you can see this one really starting to get affected. So when it comes to the plants, they were a bit slow. What seemed to be happening is when I newly planted them, they put all their energy into the roots. They were just growing their roots. The top half wasn't really growing at all. But in the last few weeks with the warmer weather, and now they've got the roots established, they've really put on some good growth. So this is my giant Calla lily. This Calla lily is known as the variety Hercules. It's got its first flower. It's absolutely enormous. It's still getting bigger as well. That should actually get to 6 feet eventually. That will size up nicely. I did have a lot of cannas that I was going to put in here as well, but they all seem to have canna virus, which is annoying, even though I bought them from a well-established nursery. These ones don't look too bad, but you can see there's a few streaks in the leaves. That one as well, but my other cannas are looking absolutely horrendous at the moment, definitely really badly affected by virus. So I was planning to put a lot of cannas in here. Those were the 2 taller varieties. I had a lot of dwarf varieties that I was going to plant as kind of an understory to the bananas. They've got really bad canna virus, so I'm just going to have to leave them for now, and I'll just have to grow some from seed next year, I think. When it comes to my Paulownia, this hasn't put on a huge amount of growth. It was really badly damaged by the wind. You can see these older leaves were absolutely shredded by the wind. But the newer leaves are much stronger now, handling the wind much better. Nice dark green appearance to the leaves as well. Not as big as they were when I was growing them in the conservatory, because with the wind I think it's forcing it to grow smaller, tougher leaves. But it's really starting to thicken up the stem, especially at the bottom. It's really starting to thicken up with that wind constantly rocking it. It's a much firmer, sturdier plant. I know with Paulownia trees, they really seem to put a lot of energy into their roots for the first year, so I'm not expecting massive growth this year anyway. I've also got my Oxalis Triangularis down there, which is doing nicely. And the plant that's done the best is my tree Dahlia. This lost all its leaves because of the sun exposure and the drought and the dry wind, but basically it's resprouted really well now. I'm keeping this well watered and it's putting on massive amounts of growth, and these stems are actually incredibly thick. You can see that one there, really thick, strong stems. It's branching all over the place. I think this will be an absolute monster as long as I can keep it protected from the wind. I have got it caned at the moment, bamboo. I might have to get some stronger canes later on. I'm not keeping it too rigid. I do want some flex. You can see it swaying in the wind. I want this to bend a bit so that it will strengthen up the stem. If I stake this too solidly and it eventually gets too big for my bamboo canes, then it will just snap when I can't give it the protection it needs. Whereas if I can just let it have a little bit of flex in the stem, it's going to thicken up, be much stronger in the long term, and then it will survive the storms later in the year. But this is doing really well. It's rocking around, but it's actually sending out a lot of roots at the bottom as well, underneath the mulch layer. You can maybe see one just coming out there. It's kind of hard to show, but there's lots of side roots coming out. It's thickening up really nice. I think this will get really big. I did notice when I was growing this earlier in the year, whenever I gave it a new pot, it grew much faster. Being root bound really slowed its growth, and now it's not root bound at all. It should grow absolutely huge. And then I'll just give you a quick update on this one. This is the grafted, just like garden Dahlia. It's a grafted onto the tree Dahlia. It's growing fantastically. It's actually growing a lot better than it did in its own root system. So if I get flowers on this, it's going to be really exciting to see how they are. They might even be bigger than the flowers are on its own root system. Now, I have come across a few issues with this soil. As I say, it is terrible soil. Now, there was a load of bricks. I transferred some slabs over there just temporarily. That's to define the edge of the border. That's where the path's going to be eventually, but I'm going to have to put a more permanent path. But what I found is underneath here there was an original bed which was lined with bricks, and you can see here these are all the bricks I've taken out of the soil. These bricks continue round and down here, and then this area must have been a gravel path. It's all gravel under here. I don't really know if I can get rid of all the gravel. There's going to be a lot of work. You can see that's some of the gravel there, but under this soil it's basically just like an old gravel path. If it's not too bad, I'm hoping just to dig it into the soil, and that'll just be an extra free draining section of the garden. Maybe I'll put something there that likes free draining soil. But it's a bit of a pain. As I say, there's a lot more concrete in here to dig up as well from the concrete edging, and there's loads and loads of stones as well. So it's going to be quite heavy work, but I'll give you guys an update once I've dug it all over, and I'll probably show you the giant mound of stones I'll probably get out of this. As I say, it's pretty terrible soil, but with all the compost I'm putting into it and all the mulch and feeds, if the plants do as well as they have done with that small section I've done, then I'm really quite hopeful for how my bananas will do in here.